Welcome to the Life's Best Medicine podcast, where we are finding hope and healing one episode at a time. No appointment needed, no rubber gloves, and no coping. Just a healthy dose of life lessons to help equip you for this wild journey we call life. Hello and welcome back to the Life's Best Medicine podcast. This is a really special and fun one for me because I have a guy who's extremely courageous. I've followed him in his career path and have been had the honor of meeting him several times. Mayor Bill Wells of El Cajon, California, the rebel mayor.
Well, let's be honest. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. You saved my life.
Hey, that's good. That's good for my business. That's good for my business.
Seriously,
no,
right?
you saved your own life, man.
Well, no, you mean remember when I was really, really sick? I had a sepsis, and you assembled a team, and you got me through it.
So. Yeah, yes, doctors sometimes we're useful. You know, we have to keep. We can't afford to lose attorneys or politicians. You know, so we have a shortage of those guys, right? No, it's my honor. It was my honor, and I was glad to be part of your team. But you've taken control of your health. You've lost a lot of weight. You've been working out. I've noticed you. We were at a meeting together, and I'm like, wow, this guy. I was jealous, actually.
Well, you know, it's funny. I like all people that have problems with their weight, and I've had problems with my weight ever since my 20s. You know, you always think about all the different ways you can lose weight, all the different motivations. And when I started looking into this COVID thing, and I realized that one of the comorbidities that seemed to be prevalent in almost everybody who was dying or hospitalized was obesity. And at that point, my wife and I both got really serious about taking care of that. And I lost 45, I think, and she lost about 30.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point, you know, because you've hit controversy throughout this whole COVID thing by taking a stance saying, hey, look, we're not going to shut down. We're not going to, you've been looking at the science, you've been looking at the data. And yeah. I know a lot of business people just talking to people on the streets, and my own patients are very appreciative of the stance you've taken. And what you said right now is critical because we both had the opportunity to meet with Dr. McCullough and some of the top docs who are treating COVID out in the streets and are preventing people from filling the hospitals and keeping them, you know, healthy. And they were saying the same thing, is that how come public health isn't talking about obesity, diabetes, and all these things, and you took it on your own shoulders for your own health and made those changes, your family, to protect yourself, you know, and that's a huge deal.
Yeah, I think sometimes people think that because I'm not enforcing mask mandates in my city, that somehow I'm a Neanderthal that doesn't know anything and thinks that there's no problem, that the virus is some conspiracy. I don't feel that way. I feel like the virus is a serious thing. I kind of tend to believe it's more of a man-made problem from China, but nevertheless, it's here. We got to deal with it, and it's serious. But what has always bothered me, I think most thinking people that are honest, is the seriousness never aligned with the kind of measures they were taking. You know, we've had problems with diseases like smallpox, where 30% of the population died from smallpox. You know, those are the kind of things that you would expect, the kind of draconian measures that the government has pushed upon us over the past 2 years. But we're talking about a disease that kills 90% of the people that it kills are over 70. And then the morbidity rate is about less than 0.5%. So it's, and, you know, look, I don't want anybody to die, and I think we should do whatever we can to keep people safe. But, you know, when they started talking about mask mandates and vaccine mandates, and they're not looking at natural immunity, and they're not looking at therapeutics, and they want to close businesses and destroy people's lives, I thought, whoa, that's too much. That something doesn't make sense here. Certainly not from a medical perspective.
Well, I think initially, I think you were with everyone else where you did lockdowns, right? Didn't you initially when everything to assess to see what the impact would be?
Yeah. So when it first started, I got a phone call from the county board of supervisors. They said, well, this is a real problem. We're going to lock down for a couple of weeks. And we're doing this because were afraid of the hospitals being overrun. And having been a hospital administrator before and having worked in clinical medicine for 30 years, I understood that, even when there's no pandemic, ICUs in the wintertime, usually you're running at about 96% capacity because that's the only way a hospital can make it work. ICUs are expensive. And so you add a pandemic onto an already very, very small window of capacity, that was going to be a problem. So I went down there and I said, yeah, let's try this. But then, of course, 2 weeks turned into a couple of months, which went further and further. And, I'm a psychologist. So aside from being the mayor, a lot of people were contacting me and divulging to me, like they often do, their problems, and telling me they were suicidal and that they were drinking too much and they were using drugs and they're fighting with their spouses and all the unintended consequences of masking and shutting down. And it became clear to me that this was not healthy and we had to find a better way.
Yeah, and that's really, as a frontline doctor, that's what I was saying too. That's what my concern was. Business owners, they've had I've had people that it's been the family business for over 100 years and it's dying under their watch because they were told that you could do outside dining. They build this whole thing for outside dining. Then they shut down outside. This is outside of El Cajon, by the way. They built this whole thing for outside dining. They said, we're going to open up. They order all the food for people to come. Then they close down. They lose $15,000 there. Their employees can't come back. Now they have employees that don't want to work because they're getting paid. And so they're getting paid by the government not to work. And they say, well, I'm not returning until my benefits run out. So they don't have any, and it's this craziness. And the other thing that you said that was really critically important, I don't want to breeze over that, is that the ICU, I was in the ICU working in the hospitals and it's always at 96%, as you said. So they start saying, oh my gosh, we're 96%, thinking that it's usually running at 20% and it went up to 96. So it was a fear that it put into people that's like, oh my gosh, you're not gonna be able to get in if you need to.
There's been a lot of dirty pool in the way that government officials have sold this whole panic. There's been a lot of half-truths and lies.
Yeah, and how do you stand up to that? With you, this is your political career you're putting on the line. For me as a doc, it's not politically correct to say, look, we have 400 studies that I've reviewed them all, looked at them, saying, hey, this isn't working. But when you say that, they think you don't understand the problem.
Well, I'm blessed in a weird kind of way in that I have a business and I don't require my job as mayor to pay the bills. In fact, even if I did, it wouldn't. I make about enough money to pay my car payment, and that's okay. You don't go into public service to get rich. You shouldn't. But I have the benefit of not having to worry about losing my job and not being able to pay the mortgage anymore. And so I decided early on that if I was going to get into this, that I would tell the truth always, and that I would do what I thought was right always, and let the chips fall where they may. And so when I started this process, so I take you back to what we were just talking about, where people were contacting me and telling me they were suicidal and all the problems that were associated with that. I remember talking with my wife and saying, I've got to do something. This is not right. People are not okay. And what I decided to do was to tell people that, number one, I hear them, that they're not crazy, that their concerns are valid, and that as a tangible way to show that, I said that the police in El Cajon were not going to be enforcing COVID laws or restrictions. And I thought, well, this is probably political suicide. I'm probably done. But it was exactly the opposite. I mean, people just reacted in such a visceral way. People see me out in public, they come and throw their arms around me. Some people cry. It's just amazing. I think they've been gaslit for so long that they just wanted somebody to say, your concerns are my concerns.
Yeah, I think that's so important. When you did, I couldn't believe it when I saw him, like, Mayor Wells is opening El Cajon, like in the middle of this lockdown. And the flack you took, they say you're going to kill all these people, your whole city's going to be dead, the hospitals are going to be overwhelmed.
They call me COVID Bill.
COVID Bill, is that right?
That's my nickname on the hard left.
Yeah. So that's a hard thing. I mean, you look and you go, because you don't want to make the wrong decision that people die and then they go back and say, look, you killed all these people. What happened after you opened up initially? Because you first opened up. When did you first open up El Cajon?
Oh, I don't know exactly the day. It was probably about 4 months into the lockdown. So I think I started in March, so maybe February.
And then, when you did that, did you have advisors, people around you saying, you can't do this. This is it's going to be a problem.
Everybody told me that I was cutting my own throat, that I would never survive this.
And what happened as a result?
Exactly. I had a few angry folks on the left who made lots of predictions that the bodies would be stacked on the streets of El Cajon like cordwood, and that I was going to kill people, and that blah blah blah.
That's a lot of responsibility. I mean, that's a lot of stress, a lot of responsibility.
Well, but it wasn't in a vacuum. Like you, Brian, I can read a peer-reviewed article. I can look at statistics and synthesize data. I understand. I was pretty sure that I wasn't going to be killing anybody, and it turned out to be I was right. El Cajon did fine. We didn't have any higher incidence of COVID than any other place in the county. So now that's it gets a little complicated because El Cajon is a place where there's a lot of nursing homes. And so, of course, if you don't extrapolate out the nursing home data, then it looks a little higher. But once you took nursing homes out of the equation, we were actually lower than the county.
And that's an important point because we know COVID was hitting the morbidly obese diabetics. We know that for a fact. That there's no arguing that. And mostly it was older people who are metabolically sicker. A lot of them had other comorbidities, cancer, other things going on also. So we knew we had to protect the seniors. We had to protect those who are at risk. And the frustrating thing for us docs was no one was saying, except you, the importance of metabolic health. Like none of our leaders, the public health, county health. I didn't see anyone saying, let's close down all the fast food restaurants. They closed down the gyms. They closed down the churches.
And I can tell you why. Because we have become so politicized. Reality makes no difference anymore. It's all about who you're offending and who you're not offending. So it's not okay to offend the obese. I'm going to tell you a story. I was in a Vons, and this was right before mask mandates. And so there's a lady in line at Vons with a mask on. She was really heavy. And there was a guy behind her, and I was a couple guys behind him. And she looks back at the guy behind her and said, who wasn't wearing a mask, and she said, "You're going to kill me by not wearing a mask." He said, "Lady, I think it's the obesity and diabetes is going to get you."
Yeah, and it's hard because that's the
but
truth.
You can't say,
Obviously, you want to be tactful, but it's important to say, hey, look, we got to. I have patients that now they know that their metabolic is so much healthier. We got to sit down with Dr. McCullough, Brian Tyson, Dr. Tyson, and talk about these things. And they say, look, those are the ones we can't save no matter what we throw at them. If their sugars are 300 or 400, and that it's beyond repair because your immune system is so shot. And that's what I'm saying is it's frustrating because no one said, hey, let's single those people. Yes, of course, if you're concerned about your health, wear a mask.
But I'm sorry, I even saw a government, one of those propaganda type commercials they put out. And this was a government propaganda commercial that said, don't exercise. It's so much work. Even if you run a mile, it only burns off, a little bit of a calorie. It's just not worth it. Just relax and watch TV.
Watch the news all day. Watch the news and get stressed out and don't sleep, and then eat your childhood food. Don't go outside, don't interact with people. And so we've isolated everyone. And that was the worst thing we possibly could have done.
Exactly.
And so that's why El Cajon, I couldn't believe it. I could go out with my wife and visit. And I think the business owners were very appreciative of people coming, and everyone was very responsible. No one was stacked on top of each other. Everyone did the right thing and cleaned in between people and did all that. But, I mean, that I want to use the right words to I'll say courage, right? Right. To courage to
I think
be able to say, hey, look, here's what the data shows.
I think it takes conviction. And I think that if you're going to be being an elected official, if you're doing it right, it's like a lot like being a dad. And you know, when you're a dad, which I know you are, you don't put yourself first. You put the health of your the well-being of your family ahead of you. You're the guy who's responsible for protecting them. That's how I feel about the city of El Cajon. So yeah, I had conviction, and I put my own political future aside. I just decided not to worry about that. And you know, it's funny how God, and I'm a Christian, so I look at things from a very spiritual perspective, and I felt like God had my back, and that either way it was going to be okay. If He wanted me out of politics, then so be it. If He wanted me to survive it, then I would. And so I wasn't worried.
Yeah, and that's that's an important thing. You know, as a matter of fact, you don't know this story, but I'll tell you that I have a podcast called Low Carb MD, and one time I said, hey, keep the faith, keep the hope, things will get better. And I got 3 days of gaslighting on Twitter and social media for saying faith and hope. And then people say, well, you're a doctor, you should know. But so I think there's you're the mayor, you're a psychologist, you've dealt with all this stuff, and you're a believer. So having faith, and maybe saying, God, is this the right move to do? And how did you lean on your faith during this time of making decisions? Like you said, you're like the father, and these are all your children that you love, your constituents, that you want to take care of them.
From a political perspective, I have been doing this for 10 years now. I made a decision not to hide my faith like they told me to, like my consultants told me to. So I'm real open about my faith. The first thing I do every New Year's Day is I get together with a bunch of pastors, and we go up on Mount Helix and we pray for the city. And I make no bones about that. And so over the years, the haters of God that really wanted to lambast me for these kind of things, they just kind of gave up on me. They're like, oh, he's beyond hope. He's crazy. And so now people leave me alone about it. It's so I learned a good lesson about that. So, just be real, and it all works out.
I think that's the truth. I think you have to be real, and you have to at some point say, hey, look, here's what I believe. Because for me, as a doc, it's easier just to fly under the radar, not say anything. But when I see good people like Dr. McCullough putting himself out there, and even this morning, I got a little discussion with someone because they were really slandering him, saying he's anti-vax. He's been vaxxed all the way. If you listen to what he's saying, that's not what he says at all. He was pro-vax and he was pushing it. And then he said, I looked at the data, and the data gave me pause. I want to do what's right for my patients. And then when he stood up for what he was seeing, he said, guys, I've done a lot, and he has background as you do in medicine and understanding these things. He said, it's not what they're telling you. They're not telling you the truth, and you want to believe it because that's the only way out. That's what people believe.
I know a lot of docs. I've known a lot of docs over the year, and McCullough, he's got to be in the top 5 of smartest people I've met. You may disagree with him, but this guy is sharp, and he's been a editor of medical journals. He's been department head at a big teaching hospital. He's the real thing. So, if you're going to slander him, you better do better than just to say he's a Neanderthal and he doesn't understand.
Yeah, because he's clearly brighter than all of us, and he's published 1,000 times. This guy's not just some guy that's working at the local clinic and thinks he knows everything and has an opinion. He doesn't give an opinion. He goes, look, there's some things I'm not going to discuss because I'm not an expert in that area, but here's what I do know, and he throws it out there. So if anyone hasn't listened to his interview with Joe Rogan, it is absolutely stunning from a courage perspective, and also from a medical perspective, saying here's the facts and here's what's happening. Because like Mayor Wells is saying, it is a problem because we have a certain perception. Everyone thinks if you get COVID, you're going to die. If you look at the numbers, and this is why it's so hard to say if we're actually saving lives, because if it's a small percentage of people dying, if you look at, a 22-year-old, 99.97% chance of survival, that's the numbers. If you're over 80 with comorbidities, you have a 94%. So if you're healthier than 6% of the people, you have a pretty good chance, right? So making yourself as healthy as you can be before you get sick is the key, which is what you've done personally. And, trying to tell your people, hey, take care of your health. Let's focus on the things that we can do.
And let me tell you what else I've done. I take zinc every day. I take vitamin D every day. I've got ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine in my safe. And, I've got a Z-Pack ready to go. And I even got an inhaled steroid if I need it. So I'm prepared. I'm not just throwing caution to the wind and saying, "Oh, this is a dumb thing. It's not going to hurt me." I know it can hurt me, so I'm taking it seriously.
Yeah, I think that's really an important point. That is that you weigh these things, you look at it, go, look, here's the risk, here's the benefit. You know, it's political suicide if you're wrong. You know that if you don't do anything, all these businesses are going to go under. And like you said, the same thing I was concerned about, and a lot of doctors raised this concern, and they said, you don't get it, but the social, the spousal abuse, child abuse, kids were dying, heart attacks, strokes, all these things. People weren't going in for cancer diagnosed because they were afraid, because they thought you were going to have sudden death if you went in and breathed the air outside. And also not only that, and I know you saw the same thing, is the seniors were declining rapidly because they had no social contact. They had no, they would only see people with masks. They didn't have smiles. They didn't have someone giving them a hug. Everyone was so fearful that I saw people decline very quickly that I was seeing on Zoom calls.
I'm worried about the seniors, but frankly, I'm more worried about the kids. This a good study came out just the other day. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was a significant, like a 30% decline in cognitive ability testing. That with kids, and I'm not surprised. They're out of the classroom. They're on these Zoom teaching things, and everybody knows that you don't get near the education level on online that you get in person. And little kids are really learning or suffering in their development, because so much of developing is by looking at other people, looking at their facial expressions, looking at their mouth as they're making sounds. This is how kids learn. How they learn how to speak, how to communicate, how to navigate the complex social cues that make up our society. There's going to be huge problems as a result of this. And I think it's really unconscionable to not even discuss this, to be so wrapped up in this vaccine cult that you're unwilling to even discuss what the possible unintended consequences might be. And we know there are.
And we're seeing with drug overdoses. I mean, we're seeing young kids killing themselves. We're seeing people with no hope. And that's the thing, is I saw that. And that's why I said, we got to have faith and hope. You got to say, hey, there's going to be a better day, because these kids think that nothing's ever going to improve.
Fentanyl is the #1 cause of death in America right now, period. Worse than heart attacks, worse than cancer, worse than car accidents. It is more people are dying from fentanyl today than any other cause. We should all take some pause with that. That's a big deal.
Wow. I wasn't even aware of that. It's always been heart attacks and strokes, but being the #1 cardiovascular disease, which again goes back to metabolic health that no one's talking about. So that is absolutely stunning. That is stunning. I knew it was a big problem, but I didn't know it was that big of a problem.
Yeah. I mean, so that kind of bleeds into some other social problems. And the significant one is just having an open border without any controls at the border. And so, this fentanyl is just flowing into America with no stops whatsoever.
No, yeah. And I wasn't going to try to get political, but I think that's a huge point. As a doctor, I'm seeing, I'm hearing from docs who are in Texas that, because the people who are coming across, they're not vetting them. They're not checking for diseases. And they're seeing diseases that we haven't seen in America in a long time, because no one's checking it until they end up in the hospital. Then they've infected a lot of people, and then we're fighting with COVID. But it's amazing the stance people are taking, where they're saying, "Oh, that's different. That doesn't matter." But we're worried about, grandma being tested multiple times when she's asymptomatic.
Again, it goes back to what I was saying before about people being so married to their party and so married to their ideology and so protective of that ideology that they won't listen to anything else. They won't let their intellect guide them. And that could be both sides, right? I mean, I think that we on the right need to be careful of that as well. I mean, I think most of the atrocities happening right now are happening on the left, because they're in power and they're the radical faction of their belief system has taken control and is, running the country like a giant petri dish. But if when we get back in power, and I'm a conservative, so I'll say we,
Mhm.
when we get back in power, we also have to be careful about not letting the pendulum swing so far that we also then have to go along with whatever our party leaders say and put check our intellect at the door. That's not okay.
Yeah, and that's a huge thing because people when they get in power, it's the same thing where the carnivores want to get rid of the vegans want to get rid of the carnivore. And nutrition is like that, and so it's like, hey, let people do what they want to do. If it works for you, it works for you as long as you're not hurting someone else. And so I think it's one of those things where you're right, when the pendulum swings, it's really, really painful for people on both sides. And so sometimes just saying, hey, what's a reasonable approach? What's going to work best for your neighbors and your friends, even if they have a different political party? I think we get so the power goes to our brain, and people are just watching that it's going to swing. I can guarantee you that. But then, what are the effects of that going to be?
Yeah, I've seen that. Let's pick on the conservatives for a while. I've seen that with gun control. I believe in the Second Amendment. I think people should have a right to bear arms, but there comes times when you're defending things that are hard to defend, but you're not willing to give an inch. You're not willing to even say, well, maybe there should be some controls over this or that. And the same with abortion, right? It's all or nothing, right? And I remember talking to somebody about abortion and defending a congressman that voted for a reduction in abortion, but they said, yeah, but he acknowledged that some abortions were okay. I said, but he's reducing abortions by like millions and millions of people a year. That's a good thing, right? They said, yeah, no, but I want it all. He's not pure. And I said, that's just not the way the world works. Unless you're living in a totalitarian society and you're completely in control and your enemies are cowering at the barrel of a gun, you're going to have to work with other people and you're going to have to make decisions that are kind of onerous sometimes, compromises you don't want to make, but it moves the ball forward.
Yeah, and it's the same thing in my field, right? They'll say, well, if they eat a cookie every once a year, they're a terrible person or something. It's like,
exactly.
You get so militant, but then when they go off the other way, and they'll eat everything, right? Because they restricted so much.
The anti-carb Nazis.
Yeah. So there's all those things too, and then, the other thing, I think that you're a law and order guy, and I know you support your police department. I see, how you speak about them, and so many communities haven't learned. And going back to the beginning of this, I looked and I said, you want to defund the police and you want to let criminals out quick, that's going to be a total disaster. And I look at what's happening in Seattle and San Francisco and all these LA,
San Diego, man.
San Diego too.
It's all around us. It's a disaster. I'll give you this is a great example of letting your ideology cloud common sense. Okay, so in San Diego right now, they're overwhelmed. They don't have enough police officers and firefighters to take care of the problems that they have. I happen to come from a firefighter family, so they tell me that if you're a firefighter in San Diego right now, instead of having 1 day on, 1 day off, you have 4 days on, 4 24-hour days on, and then 1 day off, and then 4 24-hour days on and 1 day off. This is a very, very difficult, rigorous thing for people to do. So now we come up to vaccine mandates, and Todd Gloria, the mayor of San Diego, has made an executive decision that vaccines are so important that we're going to go ahead and fire 30% of the fire department and the police department who won't comply. So now you're doing this in the name of, well, if I save even one person, right, it's worth it. But you and I know that if you have the widowmaker heart attack, your only chance of survival is somebody gets to you with nitroglycerin very quickly, like 3 to 5 minutes. But right now in New York, it's an average 45-minute wait time to see a paramedic. So people will inevitably die. They'll be every day.
They close hospitals in New York. In Long Island, they close their only hospital in that area because they can't get staffing. And that's crazy. How many people die if you lose a hospital? And it's happening over and over now. Now we're seeing that. It's like you cannot argue both sides of the coin and say, okay, because when they say there's a bed shortage in the hospital, there's not a bed shortage, there's a staffing shortage. You know that,
because
right?
You fired 20-25% of the nurses.
So you have empty beds sitting there, but you don't have staff to take care of the people, and you're worried about an epidemic, and it doesn't make any sense.
Because you can't train a nurse in a day. It takes time to train people to run an ICU or an NICU or a med surg unit. These things, you have to have qualified people, and there's a shortage. Before COVID, there was a huge shortage of nurses already. And now you're firing people, massive amounts of people, because they don't have a vaccine.
And then the question becomes, do you believe in the N95 mask? Because if they're wearing an N95 mask and gloves and gown and all this stuff, what's their chance of infecting you, right? It's one of those things you have to look at the logic, and you have to step back and say, wait, does this make sense? Everyone knows it's a joke. And, in a lot of these towns where people are wearing a mask, then they take a bite and they're adjusting them. Everyone knows that this hand to mouth thing is a problem, right? If you're touching stuff and you're touching your face in mask and you're biting and you're licking your fingers, it's just insane that we don't step back and say, okay, what's the out? As a matter of fact, I've asked people on Twitter, because I've been criticized for criticizing it, but there's not one randomized controlled trial that ever showed that getting rid of outside dining or closing the beaches or anything, they just did it without data. And a lot of people's lives and businesses went under as a result. And what we have a fentanyl overdose problem. But it's those things where if you're going to make a sweeping change in society, you should have data. If they came to you with data and they said, okay, Mayor Wells, we have a study that shows 30% of all COVID deaths are because of dining, in restaurants, and then you say, okay, we got to make a change, right? Absolutely. But you don't have any data that said that, or asymptomatic spread. We don't have data. We have zero data from the CDC that people who already had COVID are reinfected.
Oh gosh,
zero data, right?
I'd be more impressed though if they told me that 30% of the people that got 30% of your population will die if you don't do this, or even 5% of your population will die. But we're talking, everything is a cost, risk, benefit analysis, right? So if you're talking about destroying the economy, destroying people's livelihoods, and you're talking about, less than 0.003% of the people that get this disease will die, especially if they're under the age of 70. Even then you have to say to yourself, well, we've always had diseases. We certainly we've had heart disease, and people continue to eat cake and they continue to drink soda, and I'm kind of a libertarian in this perspective. I think that if you are afraid that you're going to get COVID and then you're afraid it might kill you, then you should stay home and protect yourself in any way you think is best. But if you want to live your life and say, well, I'll take the less than half of 1% chance, especially because I know that I'm not sick and that I'll probably survive it. I think people should be allowed to do that. I don't think we should force people to change their life so radically that their life is altered for the rest of forever.
So a very important point. And also stepping back to when you opened up the first time, a lot of the businesses in your neighborhood, in your town, city, got the county health came after them and fined them all. So what happened with that?
Yeah, so that was interesting, because I think we by nature are rule followers. Most of us don't break the law. And, so when you've got the county health department coming and giving you a fine for $1,000, and they're saying that the next time we're going to arrest you on a misdemeanor, I think most people say, we have no choice. We have to shut down. That's what a lot of people said. But when this all ended, a lot of those people went to court. There's an attorney in North County named Michael Curran, and he represented about 40 different restaurants up in North County that all got huge fines and other kinds of violations. And he went to court and had them all thrown out. And that's happening all over the country. I don't even know of any court that has upheld any of these fines. So now the health departments and the federal and the state governments, they know that these are toothless. So the only way they can really do this is by pitting Americans against each other and telling you that if you don't buy into this cult of COVID, you're evil and you're a bad person and you're trying to kill people. And they're going to let all the other citizens who believe it, they're going to punish you. They're going to not want to talk to you. They're going to want to throw you out of their stores. They're going to make you a pariah. You're not going to be invited to any neighborhood potlucks. And you're not going to be able to fly in airplanes. You can't go to a concert. You can't, in places like LA and New York, you can't go out to dinner. And all of these are methods to make people comply, very much like the Soviets used and the Chinese used during the Cultural Revolution. So as an American, I'm extremely concerned and offended by that prospect. We should not be pitting Americans against each other and using unenforceable laws to have to be enforced by peer pressure and by public excoriation of people who won't comply.
Along those lines, can the governor do anything to you for saying we're not complying? Are there other, I hear that Coronado's also not complying. Is that correct? Are there any other cities that you know of that aren't in California?
This time since I came out, Coronado came out, and then Vista. No, Oceanside. I'm sorry, Oceanside also. So look, the only way we can really win this is if all of us refuse to do it. If we all engage in civil disobedience, and 7-Eleven is kicking out 600 patrons a day who won't wear masks, and the manager is saying, wait a second, that's 600 people who are not spending $8. And and every other aspect of society, if we refuse to comply, if we show up at our kids' football games without a mask and say, call the cop, do what you want. Yeah, I was in a store. I visited one of my doctors, and so I was paying the parking ticket down below, and I'm sure you've been in that medical office building. It's over by Scripps, and some lady came up to me and said, you need to wear a mask. I said, I'm sorry, I don't do that. And she said, well, you can't pay for your parking. And I said, I'm paying for my parking right now. I said, you feel like you need to call the police, go ahead. I said, but I'm doing this.
You're a rebel.
Yeah.
You're a rebel, man. I'm not as courageous as you, man.
We all need to get past being embarrassed. What's the worst thing that happens if somebody shames you? Nothing. It's like,
so in your town, I'll ask a question for myself. I happen to like a couple of your restaurants in El Cajon, and you're my neighbor, right? So if we come over there and eat, and the restaurant says you have to wear a mask, and you walk in without a mask, what do you do in that? Like, a lot of us just say, a lot of people say, you know what, I just wear the mask, whatever they want me to do. And
I'm challenging people to not do that because that gives them the opportunity to do this and more to us.
So in El Cajon, is that the thing? Is that like do most of the business owners say, okay, we're not, if we don't have to, we're not? Because what I see is when I go somewhere, if one person takes off their mask, like everyone takes off their mask. If no one does, no one takes it off.
I can tell you, I went to CVS today. I didn't wear a mask and nobody said anything. I went to a restaurant today. I didn't wear a mask.
You're the mayor. You could get away with this. What about us peasants that go out there?
No, look, it was different. The first time we did this, and I took a stand to not wear a mask. I was a pariah. I couldn't go anywhere. They all threw me out everywhere I went. But I think people are just tired of it now. I think they think this is dumb, and I'm not participating.
And I'm going to put links to the studies because people are questioning. I'll put links to the studies. I just sent Mayor Wells and a few other people.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you.
Yeah, but these are I think it's important to know because preschools are getting shut down right now. There's a lot of attack on the Christian schools for sure. Because a lot of the parents say we don't want. This is why we put our kids in private school. We don't want to comply with this stuff, but it's hard because county health and all these, they just really make it difficult for people. And so, having you stand up, I just want to thank you for your courage. And I know it's not politically correct, especially for a politician to say, "Hey, look, I'm standing my ground." And I know a lot of business owners. They're my patients. Like indirectly, what's happening is because of your stance. These people are not going to lose their business, and I'm not going to lose my patients too. Because I'm telling you, I lost 3 patients the other day. They said, "I'm leaving California. I'm done." Right? Yeah. I'm not dealing with this stuff. It's crazy here. I'm leaving. Love you, doc. but we could do telemedicine for a while, but I'm going to another state. And it's horrible that we're chasing. Then guess what? The tax burden is going to be higher for the rest of us who are left to pay for all the everything else. So it's going to be a sinking ship unless people like you stand up and say, look, we got to support our small businesses, because at the same time, they were closing down their business. They're seeing Home Depot and all these other big, Costco and everyone else is open, but the mom and pops are going under. So thank you for your courage. And I know you got a busy afternoon, because I know everyone wants to pick on you and talk to you and everything, but man, it's a blessing having you on, and thank you for your stance. And I know you've had a huge influence on a lot of business. It really, it's something like my patients are so thankful for you and your stance. And even my patients say, I can go to El Cajon and get dinner, or in my town, I can't, I can't walk into a place. And so these are lives being affected. I know we talk about losing lives. And as a doctor, my main concern is the risk and benefits of everything, and looking at the safety of my patients. And if I know it's beneficial, of course I'm pushing something. But if it's not, I say, look, we have to look at the risks and benefits. It may not be in your best interest sometimes.
Can I give you my email address so that people can reach me if they want to?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's pretty easy. It's bwells@elcajon.gov.
Yeah. And, we need to have leaders like this that are willing to stand up and look at the data, and not just go with what everyone's saying, but look and see, what does the study show? Let me talk to and I know you've been talking to doctors, you're talking to administrators at hospitals, and you're seeing what you're not just making a rant. Like the perception is you're just like a rebel throwing out this rule without looking at it. And the opposite is what's true. The people who are putting these onerous penalties on people are the ones that aren't looking at the science clearly.
That's why you have to stand up and talk, because if we let the left, and I call it the left because I think it's the left who's pretty much focused on this cult of COVID. If we let them define us, they're going to define us as idiots, and that's not what I'm seeing out there.
Yeah, and I think standing up and saying, "Hey, I'm weighing the odds. I'm looking at the benefit," and you don't want to put your people at risk. Of course, none of us do. I don't want to put my patients at risk. I want to do the right thing. And so part of the right thing is, I've had conversations like, do I just shut up and not say anything? Do I just keep this quiet? But you have to say, hey, let's educate people. A certain amount of people, their mind's made up no matter what you say. You can show them every study, and you can show them all the data.
No,
and
it doesn't matter.
But other people, they'll say, gosh, I didn't know that. I mean, all the time people say, I didn't know that. Like with fentanyl, I didn't know that. That's a shock to me, even though I know we're going down the wrong path. So in closing, because I have to do it, because it's, I got to get you out of here. And I really, really appreciate it.
I'm having fun. It's great.
But what's life's best medicine for you? What's something you picked up, some wisdom or something that you'd want to share with people? Something that's been that guides you in life, whether it's faith or something that you learned, like what matters in life, that you can share with my listeners.
I just, for me, it's knowing who I am, and who I am is based upon decisions that I made all throughout my life. And believe me, I haven't always made good decisions. I've made lots of bad decisions, but over the years, I've learned the things that really work. And sometimes those things aren't the most fun. But living a Christian life for me has been a great framework for having a happy life. But, being committed to my relationships and not making decisions that I know are going to hurt other people. And you know what? Honestly, putting other people's feelings ahead of my own. And I think the more I do that, the happier I am. And it all seems to work out.
Man, I'll give you an amen on that. I mean, that's exactly how I feel. You look at priorities, you look at what matters, and you say, look, let me put other people, like, I'm not going to be selfish and just do what I want if it's at someone else's detriment. So I think it's really important. And, having people in politics like you, it's so needed. I mean, I've known behind the scenes, I know your friends, I know, we have people that we've crossed paths, and your integrity is unbelievable. I mean, it's, standing up for the churches, standing up for what you believe, standing up and being vocal about it. A lot of politicians, we're frustrated with politicians who say one thing here, and then they're, saying the exact opposite. The other go, I'm pro gun rights. Oh, I'm against it. So just say, hey, look, here's where I stand on it. This is my position. This is what we need to hear, rather than saying what people want to hear and you pander to every single group. And that's what I think, that's what Americans are really frustrated with. So having you as a breath of fresh air of saying, here's my faith and here's what I believe, and it may cost me votes, but that's okay. And standing up for what's right. And being educated and actually knowing the science. For us docs to hear someone who's saying, I'm looking at the data, I'm looking at the science, I'm talking to experts, I'm talking to doctors, instead of just making a decision based on what Oprah says or The View. I think that's where we've gotten really down the wrong path. So Mayor Wells, God bless you and thank you, man. Everyone out there, please keep this man in your prayers. He's under attack. He's going through a lot of stuff, and he's just been doing some great work in our community.
Nice praise from the best doctor in San Diego. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, man, we got to get you over here and check out my new place. You haven't even seen it yet.
We'll
drag you over.
All right, I'll come. All right. Happy Christmas.
Hey, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and thanks for all you're doing. Thank you for listening to this episode. We greatly appreciate your support. We would greatly appreciate a positive thumbs up on all of the platforms like iTunes and Spotify or wherever you're listening. And we just thank you for our Patreon supporters. We greatly appreciate your help in getting this message out. We think there's a lot of important information, and hopefully this helps you. Have a great day, and thank you for listening, and thank you for your support.